This should be a kind of a discussion, so I'm really interested in what your thoughts are in this topic, like what's your take on the subject, because this at this point is, I hope you will see by the end of the presentation, this is quite a controversial topic. As I said, like smartphones and privacy at this point and at this time of the technology, they don't really go together very well. But let's see how these things can be handled. So that's me. My name is Zsombor Kovacs. I am the research director of MRG Effitas, and I love everything that is mobile applications. I'm especially interested in hacking Android and iOS applications. I'm really interested in jailbreaking, routing phones, and to see what we can do with a rooted or jailbroken phone. So even though I know that many of you might have heard of Cambridge Analytica, and I don't, apparently if this was like a classroom, don't think I would make you guys raise your hands. But even if for those who haven't heard of Cambridge Analytica, I'm pretty sure that Cambridge Analytica has heard all from you. So it's a massive, it used to be a massive data broker company. And there are many other data broker companies also, but what made them really special was that they had a really obscure and surprisingly effective part in many of the world's political events, as it turned out, because a couple of people turned whistleblowers in Cambridge Analytica, and there was a huge scandal in 2015, 2016. If you do a quick Google search, you will, I'm pretty sure, find plenty of articles explaining on the situation. Nevertheless, what happened is that if you were a political activist, if you wanted to run a country, if you wanted to get through some kind of referendum through a country, which was how to say controversial, at least like the Brexit in the UK, and you turn out and you wanted to these guys that, hey, I want to have a little boost on the efficiency of the marketing campaign. I want to make my point really be taken into consideration by the average people of my country. They used massive amounts of data, and they were purchasing data from Facebook. And as it turned out, they were really effective and really successful in what they were advertising, what they can do. So as it turned out, that Cambridge Analytica had a huge part in the marketing campaigns and the fast before the Brexit referendum, as well as in the US presidential elections. And as it turns out, after the analysis of the leaked documents in the recent years, it turned out that there is at least 68 different countries in the world where Cambridge Analytica, this one company, had a significant effect on the outcomes of these elections and whatnot. So that's quite interesting. And as it turned out, that they're not only interested in influencing presidential elections and other political topics, they also do like lobbying for like the oil lobby in the US, which have a significant amount of resources spent on trying to propagate the climate change is like a hoax kind of stances. So as we see that this is a quite serious topic with widespread consequences all over the world. Nevertheless, even though Cambridge Analytica in itself went down in flames after the scandal and the actual leaking of a lot of very sensitive documents and internal stuff they had, this is one of the ex-CEOs of Cambridge Analytica, Julian Wetland, said that even though the technology is like, it's not only Cambridge Analytica that does this, so we can expect more and more of this kind of activities going on, even though Cambridge Analytica will be a thing of the past. Nevertheless, in my opinion, I think they were first of their breed. So the technology is now it's not available only for like aspiring politicians. So virtually anyone can use these kind of big data type tools to sell products, to perform extreme marketing. So the thing is that this is an actual screenshot from the Facebook business page. This is the front page, and it has a really nice summary of the overall idea here. So instead of trying to find people who might be interested in your business or in your idea, try to find, and you want to probably use like keywords and other like approximation techniques to find the right people to spend your marketing budget as efficiently as possible. Instead, you can ask Facebook to find the relevant people for you, and it's quite sophisticated. I'm not sure how many of you have ever tried their hands in Facebook advertisements, but that's a rabbit hole that can go really deep. Nevertheless, the main idea is that in order to make the most effective marketing, we can actually target actual people, actual individuals, to fit the needs of the advertiser. So as a result, we can say that data is power. Aggregated data is a lot of power. And this is not only about marketing, and not only about selling stuff to people or influencing presidential elections in some faraway country. No, this is something that has an influence on literally everyone's life. And of course, there is a trillion-dollar industry which purchases aggregated data and aggregates aggregated data. And at the end of the day, most data will be aggregated in a couple of hands. And of course, these companies try to defend their practices by claiming that, hey, we use the identification and anonymization techniques. So this means that in the data set they use or what they sell is they remove the association between actual people and the data they gathered. So what they claim is that it is impossible for any one individual person to be pinpointed based on the gathered data set. Nevertheless, the IAPP people had a lot of research in terms of data anonymization techniques, and they came up with a couple of researches, so to say, and they claim that most of the ISO standard data anonymization techniques, they are pretty fragile, and unless they are carried out very carefully, it's quite easy to de-anonymize the data set to pinpoint any particular person. So this is not a secret anymore because of the Edward Snowden leaks in WikiLeaks back in the early 2010s, and the Cambridge Analytica thing, and a couple of other major scandals. People suddenly became aware that their data is being collected, and they are trying to stay away from this kind of data collection practice. So actually, this is a quite interesting thing. So what I really love about this is the marketing magic trick Apple pulled off. So this means that they simply turned this kind of fear or paranoia, they flipped on its head. So this means that if we take a look at, I'm not sure if I can start this guy here, but this is supposed to be an iPhone ad from Apple, which is the, let me try it again. I should start, whatever. So this is if you Google it, you'll find it all over on YouTube. Apple has built a entire marketing campaign on privacy. So this means that Apple acts as like a defender of personal data and personal privacy. And there is a couple of other factors or a couple of other things which Apple did in the past, which kind of exemplifies this kind of statement. So, for instance, if we recall in 2015, there was a Californian shootout in San Bernardino, which was made famous by the fact that the gunman had a blue iPhone 5C. Eventually, the gunman was shot by the police, and the FBI started an investigation and actually asked Apple to unlock the gunman's phone for them, and Apple just promptly refused this with a kind of Tim Cook tweeted that in order to defend the privacy, in order to protect the privacy of our users, we dutifully denied FBI's request to unlock the phone. And there was a lot of forwards and backwards. And eventually, the Celebrite guys came. They stepped forward and they unlocked the phone for the FBI. But so the case was withdrawn from the court, and it never got into like a public sentencing or something along those lines that. Nevertheless, Apple made a really strong point that, hey, we are in favor of protecting our users' privacy, and we want to make sure that no one has access to any of the iPhone users' data, not in iCloud or not the device. So that's a very, very interesting thing. And as a next step in this direction is a couple of months ago when Apple introduced iOS 14.5, and there was the app tracking transparency feature, which was a kind of interesting thing, but we will get to that later. So Apple actually posed as an advocate of privacy rights. And that's very interesting. We will see it later on. And it is very interesting that Google was actually very quick to follow Apple in this regard. So eventually, it looks like the entire concept of smartphone privacy is it became a very lucrative selling point to sell more devices and lure people from Google to Android or vice versa. So this looks quite promising because we have Google and Apple, the two of the most prominent smartphone manufacturers and operating system vendors, and what looks like they are in favor of privacy of the users. Nevertheless, there is quite a bit of problems with that approach. For instance, at this point, no matter if you don't have like a Facebook account, even if you're not using Instagram or don't have the Facebook app on your phone, regardless to whether or not it's an Android or an iOS phone. So when you install an application which has the Facebook Ad SDK installed or the app analytics framework installed provided by Facebook, which is actually a pretty easy thing to install into any applications. So in this case, Facebook will track you, and they will be able to connect the dots. So even if you install a couple of different apps on your phone, Facebook will know that this is the same phone, even if the days are gone when an application was able to just query the UDID of the device. And the same goes for Android also. So I'm not only bashing Apple here, because the same is completely valid for both for manufacturers. So for those who are interested, I can highly recommend a really cool talk on CCC, the Chaos Computer Club conference in 2018. The title is Facebook how Facebook tracks you on Android, even if you don't have a Facebook account. It's a really cool talk. I benefited a lot. So also, if we look at the privacy manual or the privacy statement, privacy policy from Apple, there's a very brief paragraph in that. So this means that this is in the section which tells who can access your private data. So this literally means that, yeah, so we can do whatever we want with your data, even if we tell you otherwise. So that's quite an interesting thing. Apple came up with app tracking transparency in iOS 14.5, which means that the marketing was that if you use app tracking transparency, that's the actual message of the ad I was trying to show you, but for some reason it just didn't start. Nevertheless, the claim is that if you enable app tracking transparency, then that your tracking will cease completely. But apparently that's not the case. So this is the actual screen the user experiences from app tracking transparency. And whenever they tap on or not track, the suggestion is that the application will be unable to track that particular user. However, this is quite far from the truth. So the lockdown privacy folks carried out a quite recent study a couple of weeks ago, and they came up with this fancy report claiming that even if you turn off tracking using this app tracking transparency harness, the actual amount of tracking data is virtually unchanged. So, and this will be quite interesting later on. So, on the contrary to what the advertisements and the entire communication suggest, it doesn't really change anything in terms of application's ability to track you as a user. So that's my conclusion, but I let anyone to feel free to connect the dots. So with app tracking transparency, Apple actually what they did is they deliberately lowered the quality of third-party tracking services. So if the users were under the impression that they can opt out of tracking altogether, what they did is they just opted out. They just lowered the quality of the data that third-party tracking services like Facebook had access to. And as it turned out, it has a really lucrative effect on how the ad market changed in the last couple of months. So Facebook was the number one. It used to be the number one ad provider on iOS. Now it's Apple. Apple's own Apple's search ads. I think ASA, Apple Search Ads. That's the name of the program. So more and more iOS advertisers are flocking to Apple's program, and that's pretty much it. And everything happened in the name of user privacy. Google actually does a very similar stance to Apple, but we still have to wait for a how to say, like a more detailed analysis on how this privacy thing in Android 12 plays out. Nevertheless, what is interesting that the actual problem will remain. So even if Google introduced a lot of very interesting and very welcome changes in terms of how applications privacy settings can be adjusted, the fundamental problems still remain. So the data collection still remain. So what does this all come down to? So since these companies are making a huge profit on selling user data, aggregated or not aggregated, that's completely irrelevant from this point. But what's really interesting that privacy and the promise of privacy, it actually makes sales go better. So people actually want more privacy. They want more access to, more control on what happens to the data. So there is a clear demand on privacy, and that's a kind of an interesting thing that vendors like operating system vendors like Apple and Google, they are not really that's not in their interest to make all that happen. So we think that it might be the AV community that can help, that we can step in and say that we can fill in the gap that, hey, if you guys don't want to be tracked, then maybe you might want to install some privacy guard or subscribe to some service or to get into the AV community. So I think that this can be a selling point for people who are not necessarily using antivirus products. And this is really interesting because on iOS, you're not allowed to claim that your application does AV activity because it's clearly stated in the iTunes or Apple Store developer guidelines that you are not able to, you're not allowed to claim such a thing because by definition there are no malware on iOS. So here I want to kind of spark a kind of a discussion if we have some time for it, and I'm absolutely open to any discussions or any ideas from you guys via email or just let's talk here. So I'm really interested in what we can do about this entire problem because the demand is there. So we can have a quick chat now or ping me on my email address or contact me in any other way.